So the fundamental of the problem is the SS7 protocol, which has known vulnerabilities going back many years. It never had any security features built in from day one. It's unable to support caller ID verification. And there's literally nothing to stop anyone from amending PBX files to show a different caller ID on an outgoing call. That is the fundamental root of the problem. So one of the things I would observe from having looked at this over the last year or two and looked at the way telcos have been dealing with this is that unfortunately it's a cliche, but there is no silver bullet. There is a requirement for multiple layers to protect users against this phenomenon. The first one I would point to would be the use of do not originate lists. These are lists of phone numbers which are known to only receive calls. So, for example, a bank will have a call center number. That number will be available on Google. It's a well-known public number, but it is a number that never calls out. It never makes outgoing calls. Therefore, if an operator sees that coming in and presenting as an incoming call into their network, they know by definition that it must necessarily be fraudulent, so they can block it accordingly. There are other ways, there are other mechanisms for observing, monitoring the behavior of particular numbers based on their reputation and blocking or allowing them accordingly. The really big prize is in terms of verifying the actual status of calls that present as mobile roaming calls in inbound or outbound. Most phone calls these days are on mobile networks. Most fraudulent calls into pretty much any country come in from overseas. So being able to verify, in the case of both inbound and outbound roamers, whether that roamer is actually roaming or not, or is it a scammer that is presenting as a mobile roaming number, is extremely important. And that can be done in multiple different ways. That requires access to the operator's own roaming data, which is obviously straightforward, or it requires access to the roaming data of other operators, which is more complex. But long story short, it's a multi-layered solution, and the common thread is that it is a multi-layered solution, and those are some of the highlights that are involved. So what I find with this is that there's a tendency to use sort of complex business jargon when it comes to talking about the risk. So we talk about things like, if a user has a bad experience, they'll do something called churn. If you're non-compliant with regulation, that means you're non-compliant. That means your operating license is at risk. And make no mistake, those are all perfectly legitimate and appropriate business risks and very good reasons for addressing this problem. But I prefer to look at this from a far more basic, simple principle of basic common sense and basic business ethics. It is not reasonable. It's perfectly reasonable to educate users on the risk of CLI spoofing, perfectly reasonable to educate them. But it is not reasonable to expect them to take full responsibility for spotting when they're being defrauded as a consequence of using CLI spoof calls. It is just not reasonable to expect that. And therefore, just common business sense, common business ethics says that if you're delivering a service to a consumer nowadays, you have an obligation to make sure that you do everything you possibly can to protect them from being subject to the sorts of frauds which we're seeing, which are running into the tens of thousands of pounds, dollars, euros, or whatever currency. So I think the first thing is to implement CLI spoofing protection for the right reasons, because it's the right thing to do, because it's the right way to look after your customers, not because the regulator is on your back demanding that you do it. That would be the first thing, I think. The second is to do something, get started, make a move, implement the first of multiple layers, implement the first steps in a roadmap, get going, implement something. Third, I think, is to participate and collaborate with competitors and with the regulator. Particularly when it comes to mobile roaming verification, you're going to need at some point to have access, mutual access to the mobile roaming data of other operators and provide them with access in some form. So very, very important to be able to know how to do that and collaborate in doing that. From in terms of participating with the regulator, you want to know the direction that the regulator is going in. You want to be able to align with that in some form, because you don't want to get to a point where you implement your own solution and find down the road that it's significantly out of whack with what the regulator is mandating. That's going to be a costly refit if that's what you have to do. So it's important to be in lockstep with your national regulator. And then I guess lastly, you also want to be collaborating with, having a say into the development of international guidelines. That could be with the i3 Forum, could be with GSMA, could be with CEPT, within whatever of those groupings are working in this area, doing a lot of very good work. You want to be out front, contributing there, because your own national regulations at some point in the medium term are going to start to converge with those international guidelines anyway. So again, you want to be out in front and collaborating and learning from international partners on the best way to solve this problem.